Our overnight bus was en route to Medellín, and the landscape had changed from beaches and sea to something resembling the North Yorkshire moors. At around 5 a.m, our trusty bus stopped off for a toilet and a snack break at this roadside cafe, which had a fascinating selection of science-based caricatures on the walls, including this sexy Stephen Hawkins. There were also lots of big fat dogs. After 16 hours on an overnight bus, we then jumped on a smaller bus for an hour-and-a-half journey to El Peñol, near the famous city of Guatape, where we were welcomed by these stunning views of our hotel. Since we were incredibly early for check-in, we headed up to this replica old town, which represented the original town of El Peñol. We had some bar snacks that looked and tasted incredibly bad. Then we took in the majestic views from the top of the viewpoint. The hotel room was far better than we were used to. It came with our own bathroom, with a shower with hot and cold running water, and outside we had a balcony with these insane views over the lake.
They also had a restaurant at the hotel, so we had dinner there. Jack had some barbecue ribs, and I had some chicken skewers, and it was delish. Other than buses, the other main form of public transport here are these 4x4s with benches in the back. So we flagged one down and headed down the road to Guatape. One of the main things to do here is to climb Guatape Rock. So we got dropped off at the main road and then headed up. And there she blows. The rock is a monolithic formation. It's over 70 million years old, and it's composed mostly of quartz, feldspar, and mica. It's about 200 meters tall, and there's 708 steps to get to the top. And once you're at the top, you've got 360-degree views of the surrounding artificial lake system created by the Peñol Guatape Reservoir. After the climb, we made our way back down, and then got in a tuk-tuk to carry on to the town of Guatape. The town is known to be quite a touristy area, which was weird because when we first got there was absolutely no one there. This town is absolutely stunning. All the buildings are really colourful, even some of the streets have steps that have been painted. Some of the bigger buildings had massive pieces of graffiti artwork on them. Zócalos are one of Guatape's defining features, which are decorated baseboards on every house and building, depicting everything from animals, nature, motifs to local stories and businesses.
Each street we stumbled upon had its own defining feature, with creative decorations on every street and alley. It was then on to the main square, where the surrounding buildings led up to this stunning church. We were desperate to find a lake tour, but they seemed to be few and far between. But eventually, after haggling the man down by 50% of the price, we ended up on this Spanish-speaking tour. The man-made lake is highly controversial in Colombia, as although it produces a third of the electricity for the country, when it was built in the 1970s, the towns and communities on the future lake bed were forced to leave as the area was intentionally flooded, and livelihoods were lost along with the local plants and wildlife. Now the lake is lined with multi-million-pound houses and hotels belonging to the rich and famous of Colombia. But in the centre of the lake still stands the tower from the original church of El Peñol, on which this large cross has been mounted. And when the water level is low enough, you can still see the roof of the church. Another infamous building on the side of the lake is one of Pablo Escobar's old mansions, which after being raided in the 90s has remained untouched and overgrown by nature, with the government unsure what to do with its remains. After the tour, it was a fast ride back to Guatape town, on which the boat driver almost flipped the boat and played it off as a joke. We grabbed a quick dinner in the centre. It was then back in the jeeps and back to our hotel for our final night in Guatape. We headed back down to Medellín the next morning and had a chilled day at our hotel. Well, as chilled as you can when the street outside is this noisy. The next morning we headed out bright and early for a walking tour of Medellín. We learned about the history of the area and the expanding drug empire, which reached into Central America and expanded across the world. We stopped off in the National Palace Mall, which was formerly a courthouse and a post office, and had a nice coffee and cake, where Beth learned Colombians really like their sugar in their coffee. We then headed to Plaza Botero, home to Fernando Botero's famous sculptures, which are all a little bit on the chunky side. Then after checking out the Palace of Culture, we stopped into Salon Malaga, one of the oldest bars in the city, and treated ourselves to a quick beer. In the afternoon, we took a trip up one of the city's many cable cars, which not only give great access to the surrounding mountains, but also connect the smaller isolated communities to the rest of the city. We met up with our friend Reed from the San Blas Islands, who is currently cycling across the Americas, to check out some of these exquisite views of Medellín. Then we headed back into the main city for a tasty pork dinner.
The next morning we were booked onto another tour, and this one was of Comuna 13. In the early 90s, this place was classed as the most dangerous area of the most dangerous city in the world. During the 80s and 90s, it was a strategic stronghold for Pablo Escobar's cartel, guerrilla groups, and later paramilitary forces. Violence ruled the streets, and in 2002 there was a controversial military operation called Operation Orion, where the government tried to drive out illegal groups, but this resulted in dozens being killed even if they were innocent, so trust in the government completely collapsed. And since then the people of Comuna 13 took back their community, and today it's a hub for breakdancing, hip-hop and street art, and we were lucky enough to see this firsthand on the tour, and it was clear that the breakdancers loved a bit of audience participation. We then walked a bit further along and found a street rapper, where we gave him random words and he'd make up a rap to it. We then took the outdoor escalator to the top, passing many stalls selling space cakes, and then once we were at the top we had a bird's eye view of the whole of Comuna 13. We had some lunch and headed back to the hotel, because that night we were booked in for an overnight ceremony rooted in Amazonian tradition, designed to deepen self-awareness and explore inner healing. But to be honest, I thought it were a load of shit.
The day after the ceremony was primarily spent recovering, and the following morning we took a taxi to the bus terminal for our trip to Jardín in Colombia's coffee region. Our first sights of the city was the town square, with its centrepiece, the Church of Immaculate Conception. We then had a wander through the streets of the city, taking in the views, then had a wander over to Jardín's only working cable car system. La Garrucha is pretty much a small metal box used for transporting goods, but for less than £2 return, they throw some benches in there and the pulley system takes you across the valley. Once we got over, we walked through the country roads to Mirador La Jarita, which was a lovely little cafe perched on the top of the hill. It was also a popular tourist spot for all the hummingbirds in the area, along with a few other visitors that Beth decided to introduce herself to. We sat for a few hours and watched the comings and goings of all the hummingbirds, whilst also enjoying this massive net they'd installed, where you could just lie down, take in the sunshine, and relax with these absolutely insane views. We headed back down the dodgy cable car system and returned to the city. And later on, after checking into our hotel, we went to go and see the church in the evening, which looked even better than in the daylight. Then we went for a supermarket trip with a new friend that Beth had made, and went to one of the nearby restaurants to the square, where the food was without a doubt the best we'd eaten in South and Central America.
The next morning we got up and headed to the local gym, where we were both really upset to find that all of our strength had disappeared. But luckily I was consoled by this local dog that kept backing into me. The main reason for going to Jardín was to chill and do some uni work, and that's what we did for most of the day. But in the afternoon we headed to this nature reserve called Cock of the Rock Garden, and this red bird is an Andean cock of the rock, and this is what it looks like up close. Very strange. It's the national bird of Peru, and this reserve is one of the easiest places to see it. And that night we went out for some pasta and pizza.
A trip to Jardín wouldn't be complete without a visit to a coffee farm. We visited Vaz Cafe, where we started our tour with a tasting, then we got the joys of feeding their cows some plantain. Next up, we were off to work. The farm had over 6,000 coffee plants, along with fruit trees, including this one which was crossbred to grow lemons and limes on the same tree. Can you believe it? We were shown the methods of planting the new trees and how the seeds were grown in wet sand prior to being transferred to soil in order to let their roots grow. Then off we went to harvest our coffee beans, and for 10 minutes we ran through the trees collecting the red fruits. By the end we thought we'd done a really good job, and Beth was absolutely over the moon with her haul of coffee fruit. But then we saw our tour guide, who'd managed to fill his entire basket in the same amount of time. We had a wander back down to the farmhouse and then got to introduce ourselves to the farmer's chickens, who were very friendly birds. It was then time to process our coffee beans. The first job was to remove the beans from the fruit themselves, so we threw everything that we'd collected into this hand-driven machine, and then I got to spin to my heart's content. Once separated, the machine then took the beans and rotated them in this big cylinder, which was able to separate any of the bad beans from the good beans. We then moved outside, where the beans were placed in water, and any leftover bad beans, usually the ones that were hollow on the inside, would float to the surface and be washed away. Next up, the beans were dried in the sun and separated depending on their quality, with lower quality beans becoming instant coffee. It was then time to mash the beans to remove the outer skin, then remove the outer skins from the beans using this mesh. It was then time to roast the coffee, which took about 15 minutes, and once it was roasted, we gave it one last waft to get rid of any leftover shells. But Beth was just interested in making new friends. That evening we went out for this fantastic looking Colombian meal, and we had the honour of sharing our table with this local pregnant girl who really took a shine to us, or maybe she just wanted to eat our food.
The next day was our last full day in Jardín, so after more uni work we decided to go on a short hike. The start point was from the town centre, so all of this was within walking distance. We passed waterfalls, rivers, and these weird hanging nests. And then halfway around we had a coffee with a view, next to this dog relaxing in the sun. And with that, our last day in Jardín was sadly complete. So that night we packed up, ready to leave for Bogota the next day.
I'll see it.